I'm Mary, and I've got Adam Pinch here from Dolby as well. And we're going to be running through some things. There he is. Hi, Adam. And we're going to just run through some of the, like I said, integration in DaVinci Resolve. And what you're going to see is a lot of different tools. And if you've watched me do some of this before, I'm also going to throw in a few other features that we have that I may not have shown before. So stick around. This is going to be kind of fun. Let me just walk through a couple of slides. Regrettably, there's always slides, right? So while other people are queuing up, just so you know, today's schedule, 8 to 10. We are not recording this for distribution, so, but your mics will be muted during the presentation. Please use the Q&A if you have questions, and we will have live Q&A at the end of the session. Again,
recording in progress.
It's not funny. I just said that we weren't recording. No, we do that for our own internal purposes. But like I said, we won't be distributing this for the participants. So the first part of this workshop is going to be Adam, who's going to introduce Dolby Atmos and tell you a little bit about the nuts and bolts about that. And then he's going to pass it back to me, and I'm going to show you some of the integration within DaVinci Resolve 17 and how easy it works. We're going to spend a lot of time on the Fairlight page. And then last, we will do some Q&A at the end. So that's it. That's going to be our fun-filled workshop. We do have some upcoming classes. I do not have the right schedule on these slides, but I'm going to have Sherwin, who's our co-host, who'll be monitoring the Q&A. He's going to post some links in there for you. So if you're interested in some of the upcoming classes, I have a full 5-day Fairlight class coming up in July. And we also have some workshops on the different pages as well as on the consoles. So stick around and you'll see those links coming up. You also get an invite for those. And here we have, if you have any questions about our certification or future classes, you can email learning@blackmagicdesign.com. So enough of that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Adam, and he can tell you more about Dolby Atmos. So Adam.
All right. Just a moment, folks. Let me figure out how to grab this application here. All right. Is everyone seeing my screen there and me? I hope so. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. It's nice to see so many people from all over the world, and I hope we managed to keep you awake and not too much past your bedtime. My name is Adam Pinch. I'm a solutions engineer at Dolby Laboratories. So I wanted to go over real quick. This will be a little bit of an Atmos speed rant, so I don't take more time from Mary than absolutely necessary. And thanks to Mary and Blackmagic for letting me and Dolby participate. So I want to go over some basic Atmos concepts. I know some of you may already be well familiar with this, and this will be a little bit of a repeat and a rehash, but hopefully this will be useful for some of you just beginning to get into Dolby Atmos and may refresh some concepts for some people who are already working in Dolby Atmos. So I want to talk about the concepts of Dolby Atmos, a little bit of the development path of Dolby Atmos, some of the master formats that you'll need to be familiar with working with Dolby Atmos, a little bit of a discussion about beds and objects and the tools for Dolby Atmos content creation and the new era that we're in of the interoperability of Dolby Atmos platforms. So real quick, and quick will be the operative word here. What is Dolby Atmos? So Dolby Atmos is an immersive audio format, and it is also an adaptive audio format. So what this means is Dolby Atmos adds the element of elevation or height to, in addition to the floor plane of speakers and audio. And also that it can play back in a variety of consumer playback scenarios, and provide an immersive experience as best it can to the playback environment. This is called rendering. This is different than the concept of down mixing a number of channels. So that's an important thing to wrap your head around. So traditional multi-channel audio, you have buses that correspond to speakers in specific locations. If you want something to come out of the left speaker, you pan or bus it to the left speaker. If you want something to come out of the left surround speaker, you pan or bus it there. If you want it to come out in between, you pan it in between them. Normal multi-channel audio is alive and well in Dolby Atmos, and it's called bed audio. And a lot of audio can be used in bed audio. Now in Dolby Atmos, bed audio is anything from stereo up to 712, which gives you a left and right overhead speaker. So even just with the bed audio channels working in a almost traditional multi-channel workflow, you can you can derive an immersive experience. But what Dolby Atmos adds additionally is object audio. Now, object audio is audio that's recorded along with positional metadata. So it's not concerned with where the audio is being bused to. It's recording XYZ coordinates in time, synchronized to the DAW along with the audio. And this audio can be positioned anywhere. It can be positioned internally as opposed to sort of basically bussing around the periphery of the room. So you have X and Y, but you also have the Z axis that can be part of your object panning. Now this metadata that is recorded along with the object audio is called object audio metadata. And this will be your first acronym of the day, which would be OAMD, which is an important concept in Dolby Atmos. The other metadata that can be recorded is size. So objects can have size as well as position. Size being in kind of an interesting concept, especially in home Atmos, because if you make the size of an object really big, it kind of you know, can wind up being a little bit amorphous. But position and size are both part of the OAMD that gets recorded along with object audio. Okay, now the other central concept of Dolby Atmos is your second acronym of the day. Sorry, there won't be that many more of them, I promise, which is the object audio renderer. And what this does is it renders the bed and object audio to the available speaker configuration. Whether this be a home theater environment with discrete speakers, upward firing speakers, sound bars, whether these be phones, tablets, earbuds, etc. It will render as best it can, translating the bed audio and the objects with their OAMD to reproduce the best immersive experience that it can. In Atmos content creation, 128 channels can be used. These can be a combination of bed audio or object audio. So there's 10 inputs that are reserved for beds, and you can have up to 118 objects, or you can have multiple beds, which would facilitate a STEM-based workflow for post-production. We'll go over that in a little bit. And these are the central thrusts of what Dolby Atmos is about. You record bed audio, you record object audio along with the object audio metadata, and you monitor this through an object audio renderer, knowing that an object audio renderer is in the consumer's home or phone or wherever, and that's what translates this experience between what you hear in your studio and what the consumer hears. All right. So real quick, the development path of Dolby Atmos, you know, like so many technologies at Dolby, this started originally for the cinema. And the first film in Dolby Atmos was an animated feature, Brave, released in 2012. And there now, as you probably know, there are boatloads of Dolby Atmos titles out there. Now for home entertainment, this started in 2014. And now there's quite a lot of momentum, probably fueled in part by the pandemic. You know, that there's a lot of Dolby Atmos home features out there and episodic television. You know, in 2014, there were just a few studios doing it, a few streaming services, and a few devices that could translate, you know, that could present Dolby Atmos in the consumer's home. Now, fast forward to now, and it's really taken off. You know, it's been exponential growth in terms of the number of people creating Atmos, distributing it, and the number of platforms in which consumers can enjoy Dolby Atmos. Now, lest you think this is all just post-production, Dolby Atmos music isn't definitely a thing now. The big announcement being just a couple of weeks ago that Apple Music is now supporting Dolby Atmos music. They're making this freely available, and it plays back on all the, not all, but the new generation of Apple devices and lots of headphones and buds. So this is obviously something that's got us quite excited and has generated a lot of interest. Amazon Music also distributes Dolby Atmos music via its Amazon Echo Studio speaker. And Tidal is a third service that launched in December 2019 that delivers Dolby Atmos music. And it does this via a specialized codec for mobile playback efficiencies as much as anything else. So just wanted to make you aware that, the exponential growth of Dolby Atmos. Again, it started for the cinema and then migrated to the home. So there's obviously different paths for how this works. As I mentioned, you can record up to 128 channels of audio for a Dolby Atmos master file and presentation, 118 of which can be objects with OAMD. So that's a lot of data. Now, clearly in the digital cinema environment, we own that pipe. So, things are playing off disk, on a digital cinema server into a Dolby Cinema processor that has an object audio renderer that's going to play out to 64 speakers, not even including the arrays that can be involved. So it can be, quite a lot of speakers. For delivery to the home, you obviously can't push 128 channels of audio and all of this metadata down a pipe or get it onto a Blu-ray disc for playback in the consumer's home. So there's some crucial differences between theatrical and home Atmos that you need to be aware of while you're working. There's a concept called spatial coding, and I will show you this graphic because it illustrates it best. So what spatial coding does is it'll take the up to 128 channels of bed and object audio and dynamically group them into elements so that when there are objects that are moving close to each other, they become part of the same element. The elements themselves move around and generate their own object audio metadata. But this is a way to sort of reduce what's potentially a data set of 128 down to 12, 14, or 16 elements. And this translation works incredibly well. I mean, because you rarely have 128 things actually going active at once. And even in really busy sessions, the dynamic nature of these 16 elements really is sufficient to preserve the spatial resolution of the entire presentation. And when you monitor working in Dolby Atmos content creation for the home environment, you actually listen to spatial coding. It takes place during the encoding process for codecs for delivery, but you monitor it, which is a concept called spatial coding emulation, while you're mixing. Is it 100% transparent in all circumstances? No. I mean, it is a data set reduction of types. But by and large, when monitoring in a reference listening configuration of 714 speakers, spatial coding emulation with 14 or more elements, A being that with it on or off, and you really can't tell, it works that well. As I mentioned, the spatial coding itself happens during the encoding process, and that's for encoding to a couple of Dolby codecs that are used for delivery. You don't need to know a whole lot about these codecs now, but this is actually how things get to the consumer at their home. So you need to be aware that spatial coding is utilized. You listen to spatial coding while you're mixing. It's eventually going to be encoded into Dolby Digital Plus JOCK for streaming content and Dolby True HD for Blu-ray delivery. Dolby Digital Plus JOCK is also used for streaming music. There's another codec I mentioned, Dolby AC4, which is used for music delivery. Titles using it now. Others will probably start using it in the future. Okay. There's when you record Dolby Atmos, there's a couple of formats that are in play there. When you record with the Dolby Atmos content creation tools, it creates what's called a DAMP, the Dolby Atmos master file set. It's 3 files, .atmos, .atmos.metadata, which is the positional and size metadata, and the actual audio itself. This used to be what got delivered to encoding houses when they were creating and packaging content. It's less common as a delivery format now because it's 3 files, and that can be prone to corruption, etc. So what evolved was something called the ADM BWF, or audio definition model broadcast wave format. And this is a single file instead of a set of 3 files. All the information that was created, that was in that .atmos and .atmos.metadata index file and metadata gets chucked into a big data chunk at the beginning of a wave file. And this can be exported from our Dolby Atmos renderer, our conversion tool, and more importantly, it can be imported into various DAWs and now exported from various DAWs, so that you can deliver an Atmos master for somebody to encode and package for streaming or for Blu-ray. You can also deliver Atmos masters to another post-production or music studio, and they can continue working on it or reversion it and do other work. So the ADM BWF is a really important development in Dolby Atmos. The third format is something called IMF IAB. IMF is interoperability mastering format. This is a container that has video and audio and editing composition playlist data. It's designed to be able to deliver one deliverable that can be used around the world for conforming audio and video to airplanes, and for different aspect ratios in different countries, etc. In general, I mean, it is just a package of audio and video with some XML metadata. The IMF delivery format is used by Netflix these days. It is being adopted. It is being adopted by others. IMFs are created by various mastering tools, such as Resolve, and the audio, the Atmos audio for that goes into those is an IAB immersive audio bitstream MXF file. So yes, you can export IAB MXF, and you can bring it into some of the mastering formats, but generally it is used for when that packaging is taking place. The other thing that you can do with Dolby Atmos is create normal channel-based deliverables from it, from stereo up to 916 to binaural renders. And this really allows the whole idea that Dolby Atmos is the way that content production should go in the future. You work in Dolby Atmos, you're future-proofing your content, and if you still have customers who want stereo or 5.1, you can deliver it to them, and you can control how this sounds. You can deliver full mixes. If you work on a multiple bed workflow, like I said, you can deliver stems to people to do further post-production work for localization. And this can happen in real time, or it can happen offline. Okay, so I mentioned that the first 10 inputs of the 128 inputs to Dolby Atmos render are reserved for beds, and you can have up to 118 objects. If you're working in post, this would mean that you're going to have one bed, and then you're probably going to have some objects that are dialogue, some that are music, some that are effects, some that are background, some that are Foley, whatever. And that's all fine and good, except that if you ever do need to get any stems out of this, you would have to then sort of do multiple passes and master, one pass that has, the dialogue turned off so that you can have an M&E, etc. So you can work this way with a single bed and up to 118 objects, or you can work with, a multiple bed workflow, which lets you have a bed for each stem and a set of objects. It's really kind of a user preference thing, and it depends on the general workflow that people need to do, whether or not it's worth going with a multiple bed workflow. Certainly, if you're in a large sound stage where there's multiple, there are multiple DAWs, each for one stem, you need to do this sort of thing. It does reduce the amount of inputs available for objects, but this is a trade-off that needs to be made, and it's worth being aware of. It allows for greater organization of your content, but again, you have less inputs for your objects. Okay, and to reiterate, the whole idea here is that if you work in Dolby Atmos, you organize your content well enough, you're future-proofing your content, and you can still deliver the same deliverables that you need to now for your customers, even if it's stereo. Now, beds or objects, this is a question we get all the time. It's really a user preference sort of thing. As I mentioned, beds can be 712, so you do have a left and right overhead, not front and back, but you have a left and right overhead. So there's, you can generate immersive content just working with beds. And there are plenty of people who do that. They work with beds and they only use objects when they need that higher resolution granular panning that you can get working with a 3D panner with objects. There are some people who are exactly the opposite. They just ignore beds altogether and do everything with objects. They're like, why would I not want the most panning resolution I can have? So it's really a user preference sort of thing. In broad strokes, beds are used for sort of things that are palettes and for working with existing multi-channel audio. If someone's already given you 5.1 music, you could use that. You could run it through an mixer plugin, et cetera, to get to 712 to get some additional immersiveness out of that content. If there are reverb returns, 712 reverb returns, you'd want to take those back to a bed, even if the source for feeding that reverb was an object. That sort of thing. Hopefully that's a little bit clear. Tools for Dolby Atmos content creation. I know I'm going fast, don't want to use up more of Mary's time. The Dolby Atmos renderer, like I said, it records up to a master file of up to 128 channels, bed and object audio, positional and size OAMD. It's synchronized the time code from a DAW via hardware or LTC or potentially internally, and it renders the audio for monitoring with the object audio renderer. In the cinema world, we used to own these. They were called RMUs. We didn't actually sell them. We just loaned them to movie studios. For home entertainment, this is a product, and the additional functions it has are allowing you to, monitor different down mixes for stereo and binaural over headphones to understand what the consumer experience is going to sound like better, and also to be able to deliver the files you need to for your customers. The binaural metadata that uses distance models for how far near objects are from you is used by the AC4 codec for music and soon with others. The renderer performs loudness measurement of the Atmos content so that you can meet delivery specifications. It can create MP4 files for QCing your Atmos mix on consumer gear. And again, it can re-render anything out you need in a channel-based format. This isn't going to be up long enough to be meaningful for you guys to really figure out what's going on, but this is the basic gist. You have your DAW, you have the Dolby Atmos renderer, you can monitor, you can record in native master format, you can deliver alternate master formats, you can export channel-based re-renders, MP4s, loudness summary logs, all the sort of stuff. The audio itself is bed and object audio that can go from the DAW to the renderer, and re-renders can come back and be recorded if needed. And the renderer is synchronized to timecode. Okay, Dolby's products for Atmos are the Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite, which is a hardware software solution. The renderer runs on a separate CPU external to the DAW, and the I/O on a Mac or PC, and the IO is either Medi or Dante. It includes 3 seats of our next product, which is the Dolby Atmos Production Suite. And this product, the Mastering Suite, is available from our resellers. The Production Suite is another product we have. It's a renderer that runs on the same DAW, the same CPU as the DAW. The IO is via a core audio emulation bridge called the Dolby Audio Bridge. And then you can monitor out of any core audio interface. This also has allowed compatibility with some more music-specific DAWs like Logic and Ableton, because we have a specific Dolby Atmos music panner that can communicate with the renderer even if the DAW can't, so that it can write the metadata. The Dolby Atmos Production Suite is purchased through the Avid Marketplace, regardless of what DAW you may or may not be using. There are pluses and minuses to using one or the other. The Mastering Suite, of course, is on a separate CPU, so it reduces the load on the CPU that's running the DAW. It supports speaker arrays, EQ. It supports the ability to use multiple premix workstations. It has external clocking, where the Production Suite kind of basically, runs internally. It lets you record re-renders directly rather than exporting them from the renderer and bringing them back in. And it has a remote application so that you don't have to tie up screen real estate on your DAW if you don't want to. The Production Suite is obviously a lot cheaper. It's a much simpler integration, and it's frankly working for a lot of people generating content today. But the next stage, and one we're really happy about at Dolby, is that this capabilities that are in our renderers now are now migrating directly into other DAWs, both in creating, importing and exporting master formats, and being able to handle the rendering with an OAR in the DAW itself. So it reduces the need to use Dolby's products altogether in some respects. Which is great. We are agnostic as to DAW platforms and whether people use our tools or not. We just wanted to see the Atmos content made. So this is the same renderer that we have. It's licensed and it's on board in Resolve and others. And the import and export of ADM BWF is likewise in other DAWs, which brings us, kind of to where we stand is, the holy grail of use whatever platforms you like. Understand that when you work in a given DAW and platform, this content can move between facilities. It can move between different platforms within the same facility. And we want to be able to get out of the way of Atmos content production and let people work the way they want to work on the tools they want to work with. So with that said, that ends my presentation. And I'm going to turn this back over to Mary. Again, there's a variety of DAWs you can use. The Resolve with Fairlight is incredibly impressive. It's certainly the biggest bang for the buck that's out there. And every time I talk to Mary, she shows me something else. I'm like, you can do what? You can't do that with anything else. And it's just incredibly, it's incredibly compelling. So with that said, I will turn it back over to Mary, and you can see this compellingness for yourself. All right, thanks for your time, people.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So compellingness, I like that. All right, so welcome back. And here I'm going to show you hopefully some of those gee whiz wow things in the Fairlight page. And I'm going to try to do almost everything right from the Fairlight page just to show you how that works. I'm going to turn on one thing which hopefully will not cause an issue, with just will show you my cursor a little bit easier so you can follow me. Also on my screen, I have lowered my resolution so I don't have quite as large real estate. Usually I'm working at much higher resolution, so I have a lot more that I can see on my screen, but I thought this would be easier for you guys as you're tracking what I'm doing. So this is DaVinci Resolve. I have an empty project up at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open a new project for starters. I'll just show you I'm starting with nothing, just a plain ordinary new project, hopefully. And what I'm going to do with that new project, which will be different than the one that's open, is just to show you, I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to show you the materials on my desktop, and then we're going to show you how it will work within Resolve. So I'm just going to call this Nature's Fury. There we go, and create it, and there we go. So now we have a new project. Now I haven't done anything yet. There's no content at the moment. And I was just going to point out that over here on my desktop, you will see here's a folder, and this contains the two files. This is all I have to work with for this Dolby Atmos master file. I have a video clip, an MP4 that has just the stereo tracks, and then I have this WAV file right here, which is an ADM. And what I'm going to do is bring those into Resolve. I can do that right from here. Just bring those over, and I've now brought them into Resolve. And as soon as I do that, it's going to automatically create a timeline for me. Okay, so just give that 1 second. And yes, I could have been much more refined and gone through an import process or done it from a different page, but I thought this would be the easiest way to go. And I'm actually going to delete the timeline that they just made so that I can make one from scratch. Okay, so let me just show you what I have here. I brought these in. Now, for those of you who've never seen Resolve before or are not familiar with it, to work with Dolby Atmos, you do need to work with DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is a one-time purchase. Just so you know, it's $295. And then once you bought it, all your upgrades, there's no licensing or anything like that. You just own it. It's like the cost of a plugin. But you'll have all of the tools and everything I'm going to show you today. You'll have access to all of those things here. So with DaVinci Resolve, it has instead of working between different applications, everything is inside of Resolve on a different page. So what I'll do is I'll bring in the first clip, and then I'll show you what that looks like on different pages. So real quickly, if I were to select this one clip, and by the way, I'm in the Fairlight page, which is our DAW, as he said, and that is your digital audio workstation. So this is as if I had a separate standalone application just for doing post or pro audio work, but it is built into DaVinci Resolve. So this is my first clip that I have right here. And if you notice, I can select this and it shows that it has stereo sound. And I can even bring it into the timeline if I wanted to by just dragging this over here. And if I do this just right, I can even include the, let me bring this over. I can include my video tracks as well if I wanted to. Notice right here, I can show my video tracks. And even though I'm in a DAW, I have the ability to get both my video and my audio right here on my DAW, as you would see, or in the Fairlight page. And so now I have a video. This is the video clip, and it has stereo tracks, as you can see, left and right. So this is the a reference stereo audio, and I have my video as well. Now, I had mentioned this is DaVinci Resolve, and just showing you that this one timeline, I can access it for all my different pages. I'm just going to point that out. On the media page, which is the first one, this is where you can access all your files. You can sync media, you can organize it, you can do all the things you would do maybe as a DIT right here on the media page. We have two different editing pages as well. This is the cut page for doing really fast editing and quick turnaround kinds of projects. We also have our traditional nonlinear editor right here. This would be the edit page. So those of you who are used to doing traditional editing, whether it's long form, short form, whatever it is, the tools you use, that's right here on this page. Notice that I'm not doing anything else. I never leave this application. It's all right here. We also have Fusion, which is where you can do your visual effects, full 3D, all of those types of things right here. And then of course we have color, which a lot of people know Resolve from Color, DaVinci, from way back when. And so this is the color page. This is where you can do professional color grading, all on the same timeline or within the same project. Of course, you can have multiple timelines. And then here we are in the Fairlight page, back to audio. So just took a quick tour of what we have here. There is a deliver page. I'll show you that in a moment. Just pointing out that this is the stereo tracks that I just imported. And this is just nothing but a stereo file. If I were to play this, because this is Zoom, you're only going to hear stereo anyways, but this is just stereo output. So just pointing that out, that's a reference. Now this other file I have over here, as you can see, this is just says wave on it. But if I were to select it, I can see right away there's quite a few tracks, right, that included with this particular file. And if I ever want to see what the format of a file is, I could go over here to the inspector on the right-hand side. And like I said, I've got my resolution kind of dumbed down a little bit. So that's why I have so much taking up the space here. But if you go over to the inspector and select a clip, as you can see, I've selected this one right here. I can look at the file and it will show me what type of file it is. And right here, it shows me that this is a Dolby Atmos codec. It shows me the sample rate, and it also shows me that this is a Dolby Atmos 714 master file. So even though it looks just like a normal file over here, I can tell right there in my inspector what it actually is. Now, I can also change it. So just so you know, when you work with a Dolby Atmos master file, whether it's a .atmos, whether it's an ADM, or it's an IAB file, using all those acronyms from Adam, thanks Adam, that whichever you're working with, you always have access to the full, whatever monitoring you need, whether it's 714 or traditional 5.1 or even stereo, whatever monitoring you have, you can monitor this file and you can make your down mixes or render out different versions as needed, but you're never changing the contents. The information is always there. And so let me just show you, I'm going to bring this in. Now, one thing I want to point out is as I play this, do you notice that all of my monitoring across the top is stereo? It shows me my loudness meters are in stereo, my control room and my busing is all stereo because it's the only thing in this timeline. But one thing that happens when you bring a master file in is DaVinci Resolve tries to do a lot of things under the hood for you just to make it easier when you're working with Fairlight. And so right now, if I take this file and just bring it into a new track, which I'm doing right now, as soon as I release it in that new track, not only does it make the track exactly the right format, which as you can see, it's now 714, you'll see this Dolby badge here, which shows me that this is a master file. That's why it's badged Dolby, which means that this is a master file. I won't be editing it. I'm not going to be changing the volume. I'm doing nothing to this. I'm just using it for playback. I can trim it if I need to. I can change the position, and that's it. Okay, because we don't want to change the integrity of this master file. But what's really cool about that is the second that I entered this into the timeline, notice that all of my busing has changed. I'm just going to solo that track. And you notice now my bus formats automatically changed my monitoring and my loudness to the 714. So that was all done for me automatically, which is really nice. And as you can see, I now have two different tracks. One is my stereo and one is that 714. Now, I don't really need the stereo track right now. That was just a reference. I could delete it, but I don't need to delete that. I could also just hide it. So I have an option of what I want to do with this. Like I said, I could go over to my index. I'll hide that media pool, go to the index, and I could just hide that track and keep it there if for some reason I needed it. Or if I wanted to, I could just select that entire track and just say delete track and it's gone. Okay, so you always have options. I could bring it back if I needed to. So now I've got this master file. Now you notice they're not synced, I can tell, because anytime you look at these, let's just peel this open a little bit more. There'll be a two pop at the beginning, and then the audio actually needs to start later. So what I need to do is I'm just going to sync this by bringing the video to the end of that, and it should be right in sync. If I'm not sure, I can always go to the edit page. I just jumped over to the edit page, and I can see that those are definitely lined up, snapped, and they are in sync. So it's not that hard to sync these together. And now I have my video and my audio. And now I'm playing back the actual 714 master file. Now, clearly, I do not have a 7.1 anything set up in this particular office. I have stereo. It's what I have with my mixer. However, I can monitor it any way I need to, which is really nice. And I'm still going to have access to everything. I'm just going to show you, make this a little bit smaller. I can, is I can actually change that monitoring anytime I need to. Now, at the moment, it's going to set it up with whatever my system is, because I'm just playing back a master file. But if I wanted to change this, let's say to 5.1, for example, I could go in here to clip attributes. And with the clip attributes, I'm able to change whatever my playback format is. Keep in mind, it's a Dolby Atmos master, so I'm not changing anything. When I output this, it's still going to be the full intact, everything's there, Dolby Atmos master file. However, what am I playing back in my timeline? I have stereo, maybe I want to make this stereo. So if I change it to stereo, that's what I'm going to get, and then I can change my track accordingly to stereo. Now I can play it out as stereo, I can monitor it, while I'm working in my room, especially if I'm over here in color, for example, and someone's doing color grade and they just want to listen to it in whatever they have in their room. Now, of course, nowadays we have people doing their color grading in a room that actually has Dolby Atmos and they want to hear it, or at least 5.1, or someone's watching the session and they want to hear the sound, fine, they can hear the sound. So it's whatever we need. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to change this instead. I'm going to change the track type to 5.1, and I'm going to show you how to make stems really quickly if you needed to. So, or not stems, I should say, down mixes. If I need to, for localization, make I need a 5.1 down mix, and I also need, let's say, an M&E without the dialogue, something like that. I could do that right here. I'm going back to my clip attributes, and I'm going to make it 5.1. There we go. And I've just changed this file back. Now you can also do this with regular files as well, but as you can see, now it's still the Dolby Atmos master. You can see that badge, even though this is a standard channel format. And I'm going to dim this right now because you don't need to hear that so loudly. But as you can see, it's going to play back with whatever I set. But what if I need to, I just want to make a stem of this, for example, okay? So what I can do is I can select the clip just to mark it. Now you can do that by marking in and out. That's pretty standard stuff. And then I just want to bounce this right in the same track. So I'm going to come over here to the timeline menu and just say bounce selected track to a new layer. And believe it or not, this is actually using the internal Dolby Atmos renderer. And I'll talk a little bit about that while it's bouncing. So I'm bouncing this file. It's going to take it a second. And it's basically writing me a new piece of media. And it's using the Dolby Atmos render right now, the same render as if I were running out through the renderer. I'm getting the exact same algorithms. It's looking at all of that metadata for panning and everything else, but it is now creating a down mix of 5.1, okay, from this Dolby Atmos master file. So once this is finished, I'll be able to put this in my media pool, or it'll actually be there already waiting for me. And then I can hand that off to someone else who could be working on the project. Now, something else to think about when you're working in DaVinci Resolve is that there's full collaboration when you're working with DaVinci Resolve Studio. So even I make this down mix, I can have somebody setting up a new timeline in another room, getting ready to record some localization or doing whatever it is we need to do. They can be doing it on simultaneously while I'm working. We just will be in different timelines at the same time, but they can access the same media that I just created. So here we go. I'm leaving my index and going back to the media pool, and you'll see this is the bounce file that I just created. There it is. This is that bounce. Now that's pretty cool, right? Happened very quickly. I can even name this 5.1 bounce. There it is. And as you can see, there's a 5.1 bounce. Now, of course, loudness rules in this world, right? If you're not familiar with loudness, it's time to become familiar with loudness. We do have our full loudness meters here, of course. And if you look, you can set those up to different loudness standards, whatever it is you need. So if I click up on this menu, as you can see, we have, our standards. You can do your dialogue weighting if you want to. You also can choose American standards, European, and so on. We even have a Netflix standard. How nice is that? So I can switch it over to Netflix if I wanted, just for the measurement. But again, it's whatever you need. You can set it up to measure at those levels. The other thing we have, and that would be during playback. As I play it back, once I start that, it's going to measure. But what's really cool is we also have offline loudness. So right now, if I want to check this bounce, because somebody is now waiting, I had this Dolby Atmos master file, and now someone's waiting for this 5.1. I need this right now, this down mix. Well, I'd like to give it to them, but I'm not going to give it to them without checking that loudness first. So if I were to just right click on that bounce file, and by the way, I don't need to leave it where it is. It's still sitting on top of that same track. I'm just going to pull it down to its own track. There we go. So the bounce mix that I just made, that bounce file is underneath, and here's my Dolby Atmos master. They are both sitting in the same timeline. One was made on top of the other one, as you can see. And so with this file, this is the one I want to check. So now I have both, right? And with this one, I'd like to just right click on it, and I'm going to come up here, and I can choose to normalize, or I could choose to analyze. We're going to analyze first just to see where the levels are. I'm going to guess it's pretty hot for Netflix right now. So there's Netflix. And I could also, like I said, I could set it and I could check it against any standard I want to. Let's try this one and just say analyze. And as you can see, it's going to run the analysis and offline analysis so I can quickly check the levels and it will tell me where I am. For example, if I go to the Netflix and analyze for Netflix, you know, it's slightly different. And let's just see where we sit for that one. And you'll see, oops, it's a little bit hot, as you can see. Dialogue is at 21%. My peak is too loud. And obviously, if you see that red, I know that it's a little bit over the top here. Minus 22 is nowhere near minus 27. So I need to fix that. So what I'll do, just showing you the tools that we have built right in, is I can right click on this and go to normalize. And it's already set up for Netflix. And I can just say normalize. And this will make sure that both targets have to meet the standard. So your target, true peak target has to be below -2. And your LUFS has to be below, let's just see how it's looking, has to be below minus 27. And so now let's check this out. I'm going to run up here and I'm going to analyze it again now that we've run normalization. And let's just see how we did. Notice offline loudness is pretty cool because it's very fast. And there you go. And if you notice that dialogue is still 21% because nothing's changed there. My true peak is -4, so that's clearly under the -2. And if you look, I need to be plus or minus within like 0.05. Oh, yes. And if you notice that 27.1. So yellow means that I'm within tolerance, but I'm only off by 0.1. That's pretty good, right? So as you can see, that's just very, very close. So just pointing out how this works. And so once I have this and I know that I'm within range, then what am I going to do? Well, I can take this bounce file and I can actually export this out even further. I'm going to show you that. Notice that it shows the name that I had given it before. And I'd like to actually export this out of my project completely now that I know that it's right. And you can just right click on it and say bounce clip to file. There we go. And I'm just going to send it to the desktop because all good things go to the desktop, right? And I'm going to leave the clip name. It's going to be multi-channel. And here we go. Let's just go ahead and send that. And I just bounced it to the desktop. So in just a matter of seconds, there it is. There's my bounce file, which I could bring it back in. This is the one that I just bounced. Notice it's significantly lower in volume. And if I were to check that in the timeline, you would see that there it is. This is the same file that I just made. So it's very easy to generate those stems. So I just wanted to point that out. I'll delete that track, but there's more. Okay, so that was just creating a stem. Other things that you can do with this very easily and very quickly is you can also make, let's say I need a quick dialogue only, or let's say we need an M&E, just something for localization. They need to start working on something immediately and all I had was this master file. Easy. I can come over here and I can right click on the same master I had before. I could also do this to the stem. I could do it to either one, just so you know. I could take this bounced file, but I'm going to do it right off the Dolby Atmos master right here and go into clip attributes. And I can choose among these channels to mute them. So for example, right here, if I mute that center channel, third channel, I just muted the dialogue. So now I could bounce this out and of course generate a version of this in the same format by bouncing it right there within the track that does not have the dialogue. And that way they could start working on dubbing and so on. So you get the idea, hopefully, that there's a lot you can do with this very simply without too much headaches. And it's just bring in the file, change it to the format you want. You can play it out. And when I'm finished, I can also export right from here as well. I can export from this page if I wanted to, just going into immersive format, and you can import from here. You have to actually open up the file to be able to export it from this page. I'll show you that in a minute. The other thing we can do is we have a deliver page, which is right here. In the bottom, it's the last page over. And that's the one place we haven't gone to yet. And with the deliver page, this gives you the option of, obviously, as promised, to deliver. We have two different formats we can deliver right here in DaVinci Resolve, and that would be over here. We have, there's our IMF format, which Adam talked about. This is where you do, and notice that we have a few presets. Generic would set it up for anybody. We also have Disney and Netflix here. So you can set it up and it'll have all of the, everything set up exactly right. And this would make sure that your audio is going to be coming in as Dolby Atmos master file IAB. Okay. Now, when you are exporting, like I am here, I can add additional tracks as well. So I could, in theory, export out the Dolby Atmos master, as well as if I add another track, I could also export out my timeline track 2, which is that 5:1 bounce mix, right? And if I do that, it will not be a Dolby Atmos mix or master. Instead, it will just be a channel-based render that I would get. So you can add those as well. I'm just going to subtract that out of here at the moment. So that's how you would do that. Our other format we can do is if I come over here all the way to the end, these are presets across the top, is if I go to audio only, this is where I can choose to do an ADM, and I'll just show you right here. For the format, you just choose WAV file. And then for the codec, I would choose, make sure I'm in the right thing here. Format is WAV, and then I can choose an ADM broadcast WAV file right there. And that is automatically going to know, I have to choose which track that's going to be. It's going to know which track, and I'm all set. So it's just figuring out what it is you're working with, and that's how it's going to work. So I will next show you how to do that from within the Fairlight page as well. So delivery is not complicated. Working in the Fairlight page and bringing in a master and even syncing it, as you can see, is not complicated either. So let's take this to the next step. This was just bringing things in and playing them back, really changing the format, but it's really was just playing back your master files. Now we're going to do it a little bit different. I'm going to make a new bin here just to separate some of my elements here. And we'll say, I'll call it import. I'm giving it a really obvious name. Okay, so I'm just saying this is my imported master. I just wanted something so you could see a difference. And so now what I'm going to do, instead of working with that file, is we're going to import. So I'm going to go up here to the Fairlight menu. We have a full set of immersive tools built in. And we're going to go into where it says import master file. This is the only way you're going to be able to unpack the entire master file and regenerate the entire mix right here using the Dolby Atmos render. So right there, I'm going to choose the file, which is called Nature's Fury. It's a WAV file. It's the same file we've been working with before, and click open. And when I do that, it's going to create a new timeline. It's going to generate all of the media. It's going to do all of the embedded panning metadata that was applied to all of the objects, as well as the beds. If there was multiple beds, you'll see them. In this case, there's only one bed mix. And in just a second, you'll see the content populate over here on my media pool. So again, the difference is, one is you just drag it into the timeline or just do a standard import by bringing it in, and you're going to get the master file on a track. Or in this case, the other option is you do the import through our immersive tools, and this is what you get. As you can see, here comes all the content. It's going to be generating that for us based on all whatever was in the original master file when it was created. And here we go. Notice there's my first frame right here. Now, the one thing that's missing is the video. If only I had a way of getting the video in here. Of course I do, right? So I'm going to go over to the master file right now. And as you know, we have this master file. Now, instead of doing it here like I did before, I'm going to go over to the edit page because I want to be able to show you how easy it is, number one, to go back and forth between the pages. But the other one is, if I need to bring in a video and sync it and it has embedded audio, like this one has extra audio on it, right? It's video plus that stereo clip. If I were to bring that in, it's going to cover up some of my tracks. As you can see, it's going to mess with my bed mix. So instead, because this is resolved, you can choose to bring in either the video or the audio if it has both. And so in this case, I'm going to grab just the video file. Notice by grabbing that icon, and I can bring it over and then sync just the video to my clip. Now, I'm going to go to the end, and it looks like it's synced right up. Notice there's snapping here, so it'll show you if everything's synced, which it did pretty fast, right? And now I can go to the Fairlight page, and here it's showing me all of those tracks. Look at this. There are the 100 and up to 128 tracks, as you can see, or channels, I should say. And here is my bed mix. Now, these were actually named prior to creating the master file, so it made it a little more interesting to look at and also kind of follow along for training purposes. So instead of just being called bed, this is actually called composite bed. And if you notice my objects, I'm going to hide this media pool right now because we don't need it. And if I make my tracks a little bit bigger, you'll see that my objects also have names. You can see there's a composite bed. Then I have several dialogue objects. Then below that, I have music objects. And then, of course, I have objects that are designated as effects objects as well. I have all of these different objects. Each of these were created just by importing that file. And then, of course, the renderer just regenerated that for us. And if you look over here at the mixer, you'll see there are all of my different elements. All of the panning is going to be in there. And you only see one bus, but I will explain something to you because there's one little rule that you should know if you're going to generate your own content. And I'll actually show an example of this in a little bit, is that when you're generating your own original content and doing a Dolby Atmos mix, the thing you have to remember is before you export or whatever, is that the tracks are going to feed the renderer as objects. So anytime you have tracks, those feed the renderer as an object. And as you know, you can have up to 118 objects. If you want to generate a bed, the bed mix is fed with a bus, okay? And something you should see, even though this was made to be easy under the hood and make it as simple as possible for someone who brings in a project, if you just need to maybe tweak a few levels and export this out again, everything was done for us. You didn't have to think it through. You didn't have to do any patching, nothing like that. But I do want to show you that if I go to the Fairlight menu at the top and look at my buses, you'll see there's actually two buses. There's a main, which is 714 in this case, and you'll see my composite, which is 712. That's what's feeding them. That's what's feeding it. So there's my composite. And then if I look over here at my busing over here, you'll see it's only showing me one bus. And that's only because it's hidden, and that's just done automatically. If I would go to my index, which shows all of my tracks, and go down to the bottom of my index, you'll see there it shows me that there's my main. It's just been turned off. Okay, and that just prevents people from screwing it up. No, just kidding. It wouldn't be that obvious, right? But it does make it much more foolproof, right, if it's not showing. So I could bring that back up and you can see there is a main also. I'm going to go ahead and hide that again, just pointing that out. I also, all of the patching and everything was automatically done for us. I'm going to show you that right now, just so you can kind of get your head around how it works in Resolve or in Fairlight. So if I go up to Fairlight, and if you look at your patching, right here, this is patching. This is how you would bring in sources for a recording, or you would be doing your patching from tracks to buses, buses to tracks and things like that. Some of that you can do right here with this patching, especially if you're feeding the renderer. So let's come over here and look, and you'll notice there's my Dolby Atmos send, okay? And this is how, under the hood, we're going to the internal Dolby Atmos renderer is right here. And keep in mind, just as I said, tracks feed objects, buses feed beds. And so let's come over here and just look at my bus out for a minute. And if I go to my bus out, you will see there's that composite bus. Okay, it has 10 tracks. It's as you can see, 712. And it's going to, no question right here in the Dolby Atmos send, it's going to, you can see the word composite here. Those first 10 objects here are my composite bed, right? So this bus is feeding the first 10 objects. You know, it's following the rules. And then if I come over here and I look at my tracks, if you look at your track directs, that's the signal coming right out of my tracks, you'll notice that these are all the objects, everything after 10, starting with 11, that's going to be all my objects all the way down to the end, right? So everything else is going to be there up to 118. Now this is a demo project, so obviously using all of the tracks and all of the objects available just to show that it can be done, but that's less common to actually use that many, but you never know. Now that it's music, who knows what's going to happen next? But that's my track direct. So I just want to show you, this is all patching. And again, all of this is being done under the hood without even blinking or thinking about it. It's just done. In a few minutes, I'll show you a little bit about doing that yourself. If you want to set it up to be able to check your own monitoring and make sure it works, generate a master to test for your own mixing, I'll point that out as well. So now that I've shown you all that, let's play a little bit of this, shall we? So as you can see, even though I have my sound dimmed, right? Now what's different about this, and by the way, here's all my metering across the top. If I double click on that, it'll double stack that so I can see more, right? Because more is better, right? And if you were to split this to 2 screens, it would put the mixer and the monitoring on a separate screen, and then you would just have mainly timeline on this side. You can also pipe out a clean feed of your clean feed of the video as well if you wanted to. This is unnecessary. Okay, so let's look again. We're doing a little playback. Now, if I want to see this panning metadata, because that's what this is all about, right? Notice automation is turned on because that's how it is. If the automation is turned on, we're going to see all that panning metadata, and we're going to see, you know, the objects are going to move around. It's going to play back correctly. One thing I'll point out is you're not changing anything. Remember, this was a master file. So if I come over here and try to grab these faders, notice that I'm not changing these faders. Okay, those are going to be locked. I'm not changing the panning either. I'm not going to change any of that stuff. What I could do though is if I needed to adjust the levels, the one thing you can do, and just pointing it out, is for this particular project, it was saved with groups. And that's something you could do if you were working with the renderer. It's also something you do here, is if I create these VCA groups before I make my master, then I'm going to get that. Again, talking about future proofing, is I have the ability to at least control these different elements using a VCA, because VCA will adjust after the automation. So watching, if I grab this fader, notice that I can adjust the levels of all those dialogue faders that are connected to that particular group. So that does give me an option. I'm just going to reset that right now. But just showing you that's how that works. So and we have it. I happen to have my mixer over here, so I can also do it. Hang on 1 second. I hooked up my desktop console so that I could also control these things from here using my other console as well. All right. Just reset those. Okay, so that just pointing out a few of those basics. Let's go back. Let's look at our panning. Now, if I want to see this panning, part of the fun is even if you're just learning Dolby Atmos or if you're doing your own and you've mixing and you've done your mix, you want to bring it in, you just want to see how all that tracks, how it looks. One of the things you can do is you can obviously see these little tiny pan controls right here, and those will move as you play. I'm going to dim playback right now. And as I play, you'll see them move around a bit. And notice I can go through, there's lots of different areas. Notice I can watch these rolling around. It's like, that looks pretty cool as I'm watching my effects. I can see all those moving around, but it's a little bit small. If you were to double click any of these, now you'll see a full size pan window, and that will show you whichever track happens to be selected. So if I select this track, I'm now watching that 3D panning here. And by the way, if you're automating tracks for your own, you know, whether you're using a console or you're just using a mouse and keyboard, if you want to do your own automation on your mixing, you would be using a window just like this. You would open it up, you would just have automation turned on in write mode, and then you would be controlling it during playback to be able to set those levels. In this case, it's all been done for you, just watching the show here. As you can see, I can see in any individual track by just selecting that track. And like I said, I'm trying to do this as gracefully as possible, but you get the idea. So if it's moving around, you'll see it. So that's one track at a time that you can monitor using this window. However, we also have a space view scope, which will show you even more. So I'm going to come up here. Again, Fairlight Immersive Audio Tools. If you go into the space view scope, which I just did, now it's going to show me in purple, you're going to see your bed tracks right here. Let me go up to the top. All the way to the top. If I select and solo just my bed, notice it's only showing me my bed right now. And this is only showing you the active levels. So where there happens to be sound, you'll see that active levels. There they are. If I uncheck that, it'll show me them all the time. But okay, so that's interesting. But what I really want to see is the flying stuff, right? So I'm going to unsolo that. Now all of my objects, whether they're moving or not, are going to be showing right here. And as you can see, I can start to see them flying around. You can resize this if you wanted to. You can make this as large as you wanted to really get a feel for it, or you can make it smaller to kind of feel like whatever room you're mixing for or monitoring. But the idea is it gives you the ability to kind of see the relative, how they interact with each other, with the walls and with the different space. And it's a much better way to evaluate visually what you're working with here. Now, what makes this really fun is if we go in there and we isolate certain sounds that might be have a lot of activity going on. So let's come over here. I'm going to go down to the first effects objects. There they are. Here we have some effects objects. I'm going to start with 128. Notice we just left the music objects and now we're in the effects objects. I'm just going to select those tracks for a second. Let's say that many tracks. And I want to monitor just those so I could solo them. And now I'm just watching those objects move around. I also could change the color at any time. If I wanted to just see them stand out a little bit better, I just change the color of the track. Now the objects are a different color. If I were to unsolo those, as you can see, now I can kind of see the orange flying around. Obviously, this is a little bit busy, but it does give you a lot of opportunity to kind of study how this works. Now, the other thing that's really helpful when you're working with this, I'm going to close that space view scope for a minute. Again, just because I have limited real estate at the moment and I'm only using one screen, I'm going to deselect these. I'm going to unsolo everything. Is one of the things I would like to do is I'd like to see the panning curve right there on my screen. And so to see that, and by the way, don't need to leave these orange either. I'll clear that color for now. Now, if I wanted to select all the tracks at once, and then if I wanted to show the panning metadata, let's just go to this top one. Let's say my dialogue. I want to see the panning curve for this. Well, if you open up a track or just make it a little bit bigger, you'll see there's a drop-down menu there that you can select, and I can go into pan, and you can see there's my left, right, front, back, up, down. Okay, I could look at anything, but that's really what's going to be affected right here. So there's my left, right curve, and I just showed it, or I could show my front, back. So with a mouse and keyboard, I can manually go in there and select all of these. This is one place where having like one of our consoles, whether it's a full-size console or a desktop console, which I have off screen here, is that will allow you to hold down a button that says curve and just touch a control, and it will automatically show the curve for that. So for example, as long as it's selected, I'm going to switch this over to pan. Sorry, off mic. And now if I hold down that curve button, watch this change. I'm going to show, here's my left, right, there's my front, back, and there's my up, down. So I can adjust that pan really easily. But where this gets really cool, I mean, like I said, I could do that with a mouse and menu. Although I will say anyone who knows me very well knows I'm not a big menu fan. So it's like driving down the highway at speed. If you had to go through a menu to get to the brakes, what would that be like, right? That's what it's like when you're mixing and you have to go to a menu, right? Who wants that? So anyway, so if I wanted to select everything so I could see the panning for all of these at once, I'm just going to select all my tracks at once because that's one thing I need to do. On the full-size console, on the Fairlight audio editor, that's a single key press. Here, using the desktop editor, for example, or even in my timeline, all I have to do is go to the first dialogue track, and then I'm going to shift select the last object here. And I just selected them all, as you can see. And because I selected them all, I can then hold down that curve button. And there is my, let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see what I'm adjusting. But now it only takes a couple of seconds to see. And because I touched a fader, it's now showing me my fader. Let's try this again. Let's do curve, and there's my front, back. And let me make this, cinch these together, zoom in just a little bit. So now we'll be able to see these. And let's go to let's look at our effects objects because those were busy, right? That way we can kind of see. Now we'll be able to see the curves, and let's do, there's my front, back. Come on, curve. Why is it not letting me do that? Hold on one second. There, it should let me do that, but for reasons I don't know, it's misbehaving right now. But the idea is that it should show me that it was just working too. Let's try just these. Yeah, there we go. So I should be able to, like I said, change that curve anytime just by hitting curve. And then of course you can really see that metadata on all your tracks at once if that's something you wanted to do. So just makes it a little bit more exciting as you work. Let me go back to the, there we go. There's my left, right pan. So then you can actually see it, you can kind of tee it up and watch certain things moving around as you go. So again, that's just kind of dissecting something that was already made, but gives you hopefully some ideas. And again, how did all these objects get named? Well, we named it, right? Before you make your master track, one of the things you need to do if you want to actually name everything is, otherwise it's just going to be audio 1, audio 2, and so on. But if I want these to be objects, naming a track is as easy as selecting the track header, typing a name, then hitting tab, go to the next one. You could paste and add a number and so on. So that's just normal naming convention that you could use here as well. All right, so I think we have seen how this works. Pretty exciting. Actually, let me point out one other thing here. I'm going to go back to these effects objects and just zoom in on those a little bit more. I want to see, yeah, let's look at some, I just wanted to see these curves. What I wanted to point out to you was what happens sometimes is when you open up a master file, just like we did here, I can hide my index right now, save a little real estate, is this is showing my panning curve. Now, obviously, if I were to move this, let's say if I just turned off something to make a point. If I needed to pick this entire thing up, it's set in time code right now, but if I needed to grab the entire master file, move it over by 10 seconds, let's say to add a title at the beginning, I could do that, but I just want to point out that if I move it right now, because I happen to have this turned off, the automation follows edit. As you can see, I just moved the clip away from its own panning information, which we don't want to do. So the one thing is, and by default, this will be turned on, just pointing it out. As long as you have this button turned on right here, automation follows edit. Then if I did need to move this for some reason, let me just resize, make it easier to see. Obviously, even though I have this entire master, I could select all, right? I'll move my play to the beginning, select all, I could cut it, Command X to cut. And then I could just, in my time code window up here, just say 10 seconds and hit return. It just moved everything over by 10 seconds or 8 seconds, apparently, what I typed. And then just Command V to paste. And I just pasted everything back in and it's all ready to go. And now I've made room for whatever I need to make room for example. And if I were to open this up again, you'll see that the panning metadata, everything is still there. Everything moved with it. So that's all, just a little something to pay attention to, this button right here. But again, by default, that will be set up for you. So this is just kind of showing you something that was already made. A couple of other things that are built in here that are very useful is the monitoring. So for example, as I play this back, before you saw me changing it in the actual timeline and changing which channels were showing within the clip. But here, because this is my master, I can play this back any way I want to, and I can change that right here during playback if I need to hear it differently. So I'm going to reset my loudness meters here. If I were to start playback, right now I'm listening to it in 714, which clearly I'm not actually listening to it in 714. I can change this right now to 514. Now it's monitoring in 514. If I want to change it again, I could go down to 7.1. Now I'm in just a channel format. But if that's what my speaker configuration is, then that's what I'm going to be listening to. So the Dolby Atmos renderer is automatically just changing that up for us right here as we go. So I can even go down to stereo if I wanted to. And now I'm just monitoring it in stereo. Notice that the loudness meters and the control room all switch to stereo. So if I happen to have my speaker set up for that, that's what I'll be able to monitor this in, which is very useful. So again, whatever setup you have, when you're listening to this, you absolutely can change that right here. I'll go back to 714 and now I'm monitoring in 714 again. So again, lots of little things built in. One more, let's go up to the Fairlight menu, immersive audio. We do have beat chain control, by the way. If you have an unusual configuration in your studio that you need to set up, you can absolutely go in there. And I'm not actually going to do this right now, but you can go in and set up a preset and give it a name, and whatever your configuration is, and then save it. And you can even lock it so nobody can change it or screw it up for you, or whatever. You can even give them names as you go as well, so that you'll have everything ready to go and you can just switch back and forth between your different controls as you need to, or monitoring, or whatever array you happen to need to access. When it comes to what you have set up in your studio, follow me up to the preferences. Now, obviously, right now, just so you know, for this Zoom call, all I have is I'm working on an iMac, not even a new iMac. It's like a 2017 iMac with nothing else added, nothing. So I have an audio interface, a Focusrite Scarlett, in order to run my microphone in, and that's it. So I'm not using any other speaker arrays for this example. I just wanted to point that out. I'm not even running the audio accelerator. It's unplugged, sitting over there in a box with my Fairlight audio interface. Again, didn't need those for this, and just showing you it all works without that additional hardware. And I'm going to come over here and just show you in your system setups, you have the ability right here. This is where you can change your audio settings, which I don't dare do or we will lose sound. And this is if you want to work with or go out to the Dolby Atmos renderer, which I will show you the production suite. I'm going to have Adam show you that when I finish here. You would just check this, and there's some setup involved. That's going to be in that's available. You can find that information on the Dolby site, and it's also in our docs, our updating docs. So you should be able to get that information fairly easily. And it's also on our forums as well. So you would check that box right there. And if you're working with external speakers or whatever control room circuit you have, you can choose which ones you're working with here. So all of those things you can actually get to at this point. There you go. And like for control panels, I'm using my desktop console. I have that plugged in. So there you go, just pointing out where those live. So the setup isn't all that complicated. Again, right now we're just running through, we're at the mercy of Zoom at this point. Okay, so let's jump one more thing here. Back to immersive audio is I want to show you the renderer settings. Even though we've been doing everything under the hood, and I did that bounced down mix that you saw, or if we were rendering out, whether it's a channel-based format here, or going out through deliver, we do have the settings right here for the Dolby Atmos render for your down mixing. So doing that, those algorithms, you know, it's very highly encouraged not to just use these automatic settings. But this will give you those different options that you may need to do a proper down mix from, you know, a much wider setup to your 5.1 and then stereo. So, and there's great information on that in the Dolby, on the Dolby site as well. So there you go, just pointing out, yes, we have that too. All right, so let's come over here. I'm going to actually show you a different project now, but if I did want to export this out and I was done with it and I wanted to, I could go to immersive audio and just export that master file right from here. And I could do it as either an ADM broadcast wave or as an IMF IAB. So you can absolutely do that right from the timeline when you have a full master here. All right, so let's look at a few other things that come up. I'm going to just jump into a different project because as you saw, this was a project with a single bed and then a lot of objects. And instead, I'm going to come over to this one, which is another Dolby demo project. Thank you, Dolby. I'm going to go to the media pool, and I'm going to start out by just showing you my timelines. This is just the project in the time. Now, remember when we brought it in and just dragged something over? In this case, for this example, I happen to have 3 different versions. I have the localized version. So I have German, English, and French. Now the German version actually has alternate music as well. And then we have the English and the French version. So I happen to put them all in the timeline at the same time on my iMac. And as you can see, I've muted 2 of them, but I can play this back. I'll undim.
Chad.
People said I was crazy.
Okay, so this is English,
Like, head over heels for you.
German,
Wir hatten das.
déjà parlé.
And this is French. So it's not, that in and of itself is not all that exciting, right? But I could use these to then generate or combine or work with different elements to make a master. And that's what I actually did. Was I wanted to show you something that's a little going off road a little bit here, but because we can do it in Resolve, I wanted to show it. And that was, I imported each of these different versions into this exact same project. So something to think about when you're working with DaVinci Resolve is, if you've ever worked with a nonlinear editor, it's very common to have in NLEs to have multiple timelines that you work with to build your reels and so on. Well, because this is DaVinci Resolve, when you work in Fairlight, you still have the ability to have multiple timelines, multiple versions and things like that. You can combine different elements. And that's exactly what I'm doing right here. So even though this is my DAW, digital audio workstation, right here we have, I have different versions. And so, like I said, these are the actual files. Let me go to list view here. And as you can see, there's my English version, my French version, and my German version. And the German version also has alternate music. I have imported each of those. I'm going to go to a timelines bin here just to show you that this is the English version that I imported. And I left this one green for now. But as you can see, this is the imported file. It's a little bit different than what we had before, because as you can see, this one has 4 beds. Okay, because this is kind of a romantic comedy kind of scene, instead of needing all those flying objects, it's not sci-fi, not that only sci-fi has flying objects, but you know, that's a very literal translation. But the idea was, it was more important to have the different beds. And this is what Adam had talked about before. So I wanted to point out that when importing this, even though they all look exactly the same, let me go back to the other version for a second. When I look at this, I just see a 714. I have no idea how many beds are in this. I don't know how this was packaged. I just know I have a master file that I can play back and I can add to a package or do whatever I need to with. But over here, let's go back to that English version. If I then unpack it and look at it, you can see that I have these different beds. And I'm going to just pull over my mixer. I'm going to hide the media pool for a minute. And if you look over here, you'll see I have DX for dialogue bed. I have an FX effects bed, a background bed to be able to control some of those background sounds, and a music bed. So all of those are sitting here and they're all separate. Each one of these, as you can see, has all of the channels. It's a channel-based mix. So these are all stems. Each one of these could be selected, rendered out, and it's a stem. Or, like I said, we can combine all those. Right now, they're all going to play back as Dolby Atmos, right? As a Dolby Atmos file, 714, because that's what I have it set to. And remember the rule I mentioned earlier, the beds are fed, right? When you originally make it, the beds are going to be fed by, that's right, buses, and then objects are created from the tracks. Okay, so it's always good to remember those things. And again, I'll point that out probably at least one more time. So this is the English version. As you can see, there's flying objects, there's dialogue. And if you look over here, you'll see that with my objects, I have only 2 dialogue objects, and then I have some effects objects, quite a few, some background objects, and then just a few of these different music objects. So what I want to point out was I can then combine these, because guess what? I'm going to go back to my media pool. You know what, before I show that, since I have a minute, is I'm going to come over here to the Fairlight menu and just show you the patch input output, because this is exactly what we had before. And when this was imported, all that patching was done for us. Only this time there are 4 beds. Each are 10 channels wide. So that means the first 40 channels of my 128. How's that for morning math? I'm in LA, so it's still morning for me. Those are all going to be allocated to, that's right, our beds. And so if I come over here and look at my bus out, you'll see that there are all those different channels. The first 40, there you go. Those first 40 are going to be my beds. And as you can see, if I come up here, my dialogue bed, then we have my effects bed, we have my background bed, and then the music beds, and those are each 10 channels. So again, you have 128 channels to work with when you're doing your mixing to Dolby Atmos for your mastering. And so how you package those, as Adam mentioned, it's entirely up to you. This is a big time saver if you needed to be able to, like I said, break these off, change them, or do something else for localization. A lot of that work has already been done because these have been split off into separate beds. And then of course, if I switch this back to the track direct, you'll see that everything from 41 down to 86, those sends are now my objects, which are down here. Okay, cool, right? I didn't actually change anything. Again, just showing you how it's set up. So let's do something fun. I'm going to go back over here. Fun for me anyway. So this is our English version. Now, if I come over here to the French version, I've actually changed the colors on these just to make it so you could recognize the different version. Because if everything's green, you won't really see it as well. So here I have the French version that I unpacked, as you can see. And then here's my German version right here. And if I go back to my timelines, you'll see that I have them each already opened up. And here's my German version, which I made yellow just so that we could see that very easily. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make a new version, a localized version. I want to make one that has, ready for this, all of the dialogue in each different language, all within one master file that I could listen to while it's in Resolve, and then I could decide which way I wanted to export it out. So it's a little economical and it's fairly cool. So let's just do that. I'm going to take my English timeline and I'm just going to duplicate that. So we'll use that as our background. So if I want to, I need to come over here and just right click that and I will duplicate it. There, I have my copy and I'm just going to bring that copy over here into my master only because I'm just splitting it out. There it is right here. It's the one called English copy that I just made. And instead, I'm going to call this three languages there. I'll just give it a really lame name, but you can recognize it that way, right? So now this is the one that's called 3 languages. Now at the moment, it's just the English version. That's all I made. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take advantage of something you can do in DaVinci Resolve, which you can do layered audio editing, meaning pile things on top of each other within the same track. And you only hear what's on top. So you can use this for your building comps. If you're doing ADR recording, you record right on top of each take, and then you can access them and move them around. And again, choose which one you want. But anything that's in the lower layers, it doesn't cost anything for processing. You're just storing it there, but it makes it much more convenient to work with. So let's check this out. So right now we have our dialogue bed. I'm going to actually use my up and down arrows to get to the beginning. As you can see, I want to make sure we're definitely on the first frame, which we are. So I've got my dialogue bed, but I also want to select, let's say we want to select both dialogue objects, and that's really what's going to be replaced, right? Those 3 things is what we want to drop something new onto. I'm going to drop, let's put the French version on top and then a German on top of that one, just because we can. So I'm going to come up here and I just selected these ahead of time. I didn't have to. In fact, I could select them after. But what I want to do is just make sure my play is in the right position to make this a little bit easier. And then I need to jump into that other timeline. I'm going to come over here to this timelines bin. Let's open up the French version, the exact same thing. Remember, I just opened this up, right? So same show. This has just got the German dubbing. And so what I want to do is I'm going to select, make sure my playhead's on that first frame. And it is. Okay, that's always helpful. Just because when you copy and paste using Fairlight, it's looking at your playhead position and it's going to remember the playhead's location in reference to the video clip. And then the other thing it's going to know is it's looking at selected tracks. That's where it's going to know what to paste. Now I'm being a little ambitious here because not only am I just doing one track, but I'm going to skip a few and command select these 2 as well. So there we go. We have these 3. So it's going to remember this if I do these in the right order. I'm going to do a command C for copy because I'm on a Mac. And what it did is it just made a ghost image of that, which is now attached to that playhead. It's like, okay, now what do I do with it? I'm going to go back to my other timeline right here. And I'm in the timeline where I want to paste it. I'm going to select the dialogue bed and the 2 dialogue objects. And I'm going to do a paste, Command V. And you notice that the blue clip just jumped on top of those. Now I'm going to undo that for a second because the one thing I didn't check was to see if I have layered audio editing enabled. That is not a default. Let's come over here to the timeline menu. And I just happen to have it turned on because I've been testing this. If I had that turned off, which by default it is turned off, layered audio editing, then what it would do is it would overwrite what I had there with the new file. And it would just cover it up, but the other one would be not be there anymore. So I want to make sure layered audio editing is on. And then of course, do that paste. And so now you can see the blue version is sitting on top of the green version, or at least I told you it is. Let's go back over here to the German version now. Okay. And by the way, I could come over here and jump between my timelines as well. I don't even need to be doing this here. Just for fun, let's do it here. So we were on the 3 languages version. And now I'm switching to my German version as well. So this will access any timelines that I might have or recent timelines. And then what I would then do is select this first one. Again, selecting those in order. I'm holding Shift to do that. Command C to copy. Let's go back to my 3 languages. And I'm going to paste. Very easy, right? So now I have just updated this. So this is still a master file with all the flying objects. Everything's there, or at least in my timeline, it's going to play it back. But I just can now choose which version I want. This is also really cool with checking out alternate music. Because that gives you the opportunity to, do something a little bit different with the music or switch out the different music. I'm not going to do it in this one because I don't want to use all my time showing this, but it's great to be able to switch between music. So when I talk about switching things, what do I mean? I'm just going to look at this one track because this is the one that's holding all of that information. Now, when you do this, by the way, right now there are layers in here. As you know, 3 different layers. If you want to see your layers, you come up here to the view menu and you show your audio track layers. And as you can see, underneath there, you can see there they are. These are the different layers. Now, to make this a little bit easier to see, this is a little bit harder for me because I'm going to just hide my meters for a second. It's a little bit harder because, real estate, but you can see it. And there's all 3 of those different versions. They're colored. These are sitting here. Notice that when I turn on layers, every single track has 1 layer above it in case there's more stuff I want to see. But what this gives you the ability to do is move them around. Now, if you've ever moved anything on a computer, which you probably have, you've moved video clips around or you've moved audio. If you ever want to constrain it, you probably already know the shortcut for constraining would be Shift. Otherwise, I could move these out of sync if I'm not careful about that. But the cool thing is, if I want to put the English back, I could just hold Shift and drag it straight up, and now the English is on top. If I want the German on top, it's on top. And what's awesome about it, you're probably going, right, wait, what? Let me bring back my meters. I'm hoping I don't have a lot of artifacts here so you can see this. I'm bringing back my meters, and I'm going to make the video a little bit bigger so you can see it there. And I'm going to switch languages while we play it, just so you can see how this works. So right now, I'll put, there, the English is on top.
Chad. People said I was verrückt. Prom king, falling head over heels for you.
Du bist nicht sexy.
Chad, wir hatten das geklärt. Du bist nicht mein Typ.
Cassandra, warte bitte.
So anyways, I could do this all day, right? What else is fun is, like I said, if I have multiple temp music bits, or we're testing out different music with a scene, even if this wasn't Dolby Atmos, you could stack them right on top of each other. And while the scene plays, you can dynamically do that. Now, yes, of course, you can use solo and mute to do something similar, but this is all inside of one file, which is pretty awesome. So at least I find it awesome, but then, it's me. So anyway, that's kind of cool, right? And so what makes this even better is I can choose whichever language I end up with. Let's just say we want to make this the German version is what we're going to end with, or yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to go back and I want to export this as a German master, even though I have all the elements in here. I just need to make sure that that is the one on top. So Shift and pull that up there. It's on top. And then what I need to do is come down here and also go to this and make sure the German's on top here, which it happens to be. Otherwise, I'd move them around on my 2 dialogue objects. You notice that those don't take up as much space because these are mono. So it's real easy to move those dialogue objects around. Again, you can just shuffle those around as needed. In this case, I just put the German on top. Then I just hide my audio track layers anytime, just like that. And so what I've done is, even though this is the same master file we had before. As you can see, those colors show me that I'm now working with my German version. If I play it back, I didn't switch the music, but you get the idea.
Ich der König verliebe mich.
Okay. And then from here, I can actually export this right from, if I wanted to, I could export this right from the Fairlight page, immersive audio, and I could say export master. I could do this as an IAB, all right, MXF package, which will include the video, or I can do this as an ADM. And of course, you can also go to the deliver page and do the same thing. Right here, I can come over and say, okay, I need to get this version out. There's my IMF. And I could set that up and export it here, and it's going to be my German version. So anyway, that was just something going a little bit off-road to show you something that you may not have seen. I know I've not demoed that, but I found that kind of fun. Now, one last thing I'll show you, and then we'll go to Q&A. And anyone who knows me knows there's always one last thing, right? Let's switch this over. I also want to show you, let's say you want to do your own mixing now. You've got a project, maybe it was channel-based and you want to kind of blow it out and make it a Dolby Atmos mix, or you're just experimenting around and want to try to set it up. One of the things you want to be able to do is maybe check all your speakers. Let's say you have, in this example, I'll do a 714 just so you can check your overheads, check everything. And let's say you just want to set up a way to identify those different channels and make sure everything's working in your Resolve system. So in this case, I have just a really basic start project I made. And when I say basic, I mean really, really basic. So at this moment, all I have is a sound. Okay, let's take a look at what I have. This one's way less exciting. Is that we have, here's the channels. Now these have been pre-named just to make it easier, but they also could have been just audio 1 through, whatever I need. And if I look at this, all I did, and this is following the logic that most people would have, is, okay, I want to check my speakers. I'm going to make myself a 714 bus and I should be good to go. And that's not the case, but I will point that out because if you remember the rules, I'll remind you. Okay, so here's a 714 master bus. I named it master only to make this easier. It could also be named bus 1, which is what you would actually get. So notice I have 12 channels. Here's my 714. I'm so happy, right? I got everything good to go. Now I'm going to bring up a little meter that we have. I'll bring out the jellyfish for this. In metering, DaVinci Resolve Fairlight includes all kinds of plugins that you can use that are free to use with the software. And obviously they'll work on any platform too, Mac or Windows. So you don't have to bring a dongle along. You can just use our plugins. You can also use, by the way, your VST plugins or AU plugins as well. In this case, I'm going to go and bring up our surround analyzer just because we have it and I can. And so this is basically to show me the panning for these different elements. Now, following normal people's logic who may never have used or set up for Dolby Atmos before, I have the same tone on each channel. I have all of these tracks and I have a bus and everything's going to the bus, so it should work, right? No, because everything right now, if you look at your panning, all of these are panned to the center. So we are destined to fail, but I'll go ahead and show you, but let me dim this. Notice that, oh, look, center pan all the way across the board. So I will stop at this point, but you get the general idea that this is not going to work, right? So what we want to do is we do need to make sure we have changed this. So if I wanted to pan all of these, I can manually go in, I can open this up and say, okay, I need to pan this to the left, or I need to pan this one to the right. And I could sit there and pan these. And that might take a little bit of time, but I could eventually get there, right? Well, one of the things that you can also do for your panning is you can link them. So I'm going to come up here in the Fairlight menu. Notice pretty much anything that's cool for Fairlight that it requires a menu is going to be in the Fairlight menu. I'm going to go to link group, and this will allow you to choose your tracks. And when you choose any of your mono channels, it will let you, you can have any kind of channels in here, but only the mono ones it will allow you to link. So if you have a separate left and right, you could just link those two together and it will give you a stereo pair for those, right? It will pan them stereo and link those together. In this case, I want to select them all. And notice that it automatically shows me Dolby Atmos 714. If I were to select fewer, it's going to say, oh, that must be a 7.0 or a 6.1. If I select another one, now it's thinking, oh, is this a 5.1.2, 7.1 film, or 7.1? So based on how many channels, it's guessing how you want this panned, and it'll give you a single fader for control, but it will automatically map it to the right configuration. So in this case, 7.1.4, I click Dolby Atmos 7.1.4, and I just link those together. And as you can see, now that I've done that, let's look at that would be my dog. And as you can see, I'm going to open up the panner, and they are all panned exactly dead on to the targets. Okay. And as you can see, I'm following the signals. So theoretically, the signals are working. And if I look at the meters, the signal's working, and you can see it. Now the overheads, the final 4 aren't going to show up here because those are not part of this surround channel analyzer. Those are overheads, but the standard channels are all showing up here on the meter. Now this gets just a hair more complicated, but not much. I have a single fader for this, and I have single fader control. If I wanted these to be mono channels, so I have more control, and for whatever reason, I can do that too. Mono meaning if I wanted discrete channels for these, all I have to do is go back to Fairlight, go down to link group, and just unlink these. And here's the magical part. When I unlink these, all the panning from when they were linked remains, including the boom. So with my LFE. So if I pull those apart, do you notice that I now have perfect panning for my 7.1.4 outputs, everything, including my overheads, which are these last 4. If you look at the targets, let me just bring this up, and you'll see there are 4 targets on the ceiling for those, and each of these is assigned exactly to the right target. So all of that panning is dead on, ready to go. All I need is to add my own materials after the fact. This is just a test, right? It's just a test. Now you'd think that we'd be done, right? But of course it's not that easy, because let's remember, what's that rule? I've mentioned it 3 times, maybe. Here we go. Last time is, if I really wanted to make a master from this, if I wanted to generate a master file, don't forget that tracks feed objects and buses feed beds. I don't have a bus setting up a bed right now. All I have is my master, right? So right now, my entire thing is nothing but objects, which is not what I want. I still want to have my bed mix. And if for no other reason, your LFE, that would be your low frequency effects, going to your subwoofer, your LFE requires, for the Dolby Atmos renderer to recognize and to embed that properly, it needs to come from a bed. Okay, so it has to come from a bus. So I get messages from people trying to figure out, how do I get to my LFE? I'm not hearing my LFE. What's up with that? It needs to have a bed. So let's do that. And if I go up to the Fairlight menu, bus format, right now, I can close this up. Right now, all I have is my master, my Dolby Atmos. And in this case, and for this example, to test a 7.1.4 array, it's a 7.1.4 master. Great. I need to add a bus. Okay, I just added a bus, and we'll call this the bed. I'm just giving it a name, and it's going to be a 7.1 bed. Notice I can change that. Now, real quickly, for those of you making your own content, if you're starting with a brand new project and you want to create Dolby Atmos beds, and mastering and things like that, if you want to be able to make tracks that are Dolby Atmos or buses, you do need to come over here, and I'll just go to the bottom right corner and show you where that is. There's a little gear at the bottom. This brings up your project settings. And one thing you will need to do is go to Fairlight and turn that on. Now, because I already pre-set up this project, you'll notice I already had it turned on, but you do need to check this box. You'll notice we do have other formats as well. Other immersive formats, you can turn on as many as you want to, depending on what you're working with. In this case, I just enabled Dolby Atmos. Okay, so just pointing that out. One more thing. Did I tell you? Okay, so now that we have this set up, let me go back to my bus format and just show you bus format window. There it is. I'm going to change the color of my bed just because to like a purple. So that way we have green for the master and the beds are purple, kind of like the objects and beds. It doesn't really mean anything if it's purple, by the way. And there you have it. So you can see both of those right now. We have bus 1, which is the master, and then we have bus 2. Now, what I need to do is I need to pan these. I need to actually patch these differently, because what I need is my 7-1 channels, all 8 channels that are my standard channel layout for 7-1 surround. Those need to be in a separate bus. Those need to be actually in a separate bus that then feeds the master. It's super easy to do that. Let's come over here to the Fairlight bus assign. This is where you can assign all the tracks at once. I can do them individually here. I could sit there and say, okay, I want to change this one, get rid of that, and I want to change this one to the bed. And I could go through there and manually change all of these, no problem. But it's much faster to go over here to bus assign. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the master out and just unassign everything. And then I'm going to select the bed out. There is a send and an out for both. So if you want to treat this more like an auxiliary and just send some information, you have the ability to do that using sends. In this case, I'm looking at the outputs, and I'm going to unassign all those as well. So now there are no assignments. If I were to play this, nothing's going to happen because there is nothing running to any of my buses at the moment. Let's go over here to bus assign. And it was hiding. Okay. So here we have our bus assign. So again, I need all of these different standard channel formats to be going to this 7-1 bus. Okay. So I'm going to just select all of, actually, let me assign that. Let me select my 7-1 out. And then I'm just going to drag across these until I get to the right surround rear and let go, and I'm done. I just assigned all of these, all 8 are now going to the 7-1 bus out. Okay. Now these ones that say LTF, that would be left top front, right top front, and so on. Those are the overheads. And in this case, I happen to have 4 overheads. Well, those I want to go to my master out. That would be so that they get assigned as objects. So I need to select that master out first, and so on. I can do that right here. Done. Okay. And then close. And as you can see, those are all set. Now there's one thing I haven't done yet. You're like, wait, what? One last thing. So I've now patched these the way they need to go, but see this bed right here? That bed needs to feed the master. So the last thing we need to do is, when you're working with our new flex bus format, any track can be assigned to any bus can be assigned to a track, or buses can go to other buses. So it's infinitely flexible, cascading busing. And in this case, I'm going to take this bus, my 7-1 bus that I just set up, and I need to assign that to the master. And by doing that, that will become my bed. If I wanted to have multiple beds, if I wanted to set it up like what I'd showed you before, where you have your dialogue bed, your effects bed, and your music bed, multiple beds, then I would make multiple 7-1 buses, right? And then each one of those would have only the tracks associated, or only the channels needed to create those buses, just as if they were stems. Okay, so now that I have this set up, theoretically, all of this patching should be correct. I'm just watching, and I will continue to dim this, but as you can see, as I go across this, this should light up everything, even if I don't hear the LFE. And as you can see, they're all there. Okay, all lighting everything up. And then from here, I could go to Fairlight and I could say export master file. I'll do this one as an ADM file and just export, and we'll call this. This is my ident test for 714, just generated a master very quickly. And as you can see, there it is. And there is the file that I just made, as you can see. So pretty cool that you can make that this easily. So I think I have rambled on enough, and I hopefully shown you some features that are very helpful. I'm going to go back to Adam in 1 second. I wanted to run back to this for one brief second to show you when you're working with multiple beds, what you may not realize is this is just as if we had separated these out as stems. So for example, if I open this up enough, you'll see that my dialogue bed only has sound in the dialogue channel, right? That makes sense because that's where it should be. So as you're panning or setting these bed mixes up, just be aware that that's something that you need to do. So cool. All right, so I am going to go back to my awesome slides. I'm not a slide girl either, you may know this. Maybe I'm going back to my slides. Here we go. Back to slides, and now we can open up some little bit of Q&A with the time we have left. So Adam, if you want to jump back in. Oh, and actually, Adam, if you've got a second, I'd love for him to show you Fairlight working with the Dolby Atmos renderer, because that's pretty awesome. So Adam.
Okay, I'll try and do that as quickly as I can here.
Some assembly required, right?
Assembly required. All right, you should be seeing my desktop now. Here's Resolve. Here's the Dolby Atmos production suite running on the same computer. I'm going to quick change my preferences, so hopefully you can hear something going out to Zoom world. Now, as Mary showed you, in the preferences, you would select the output. In this case, the audio I/O, we are indeed connected to a render 127.0.0.1, which is the local renderer, and the output device is the Dolby audio bridge. So what this means is that in the Fairlight, in the patch input output, where you had the audio sends feeding the internal renderer in Fairlight, if you want to go out, you'd feed the audio output, so that you can see in this case, I've got a composite bed and a whole bunch of objects feeding my output. What I also need to do is get some time code out, so that, which in this case I've got going to 129, so that I can synchronize the production suite to the to Resolve, and I'll make sure that it's actually generating code. So at that point, if I do playback, you'll see that I've actually chasing Resolve, and I am monitoring through the Dolby Atmos production suite as my renderer and not the onboard in Fairlight at this point. And reasons, this capability was in Resolve Fairlight before the onboard renderer came on board. So this isn't absolutely necessary. It is needed for some capabilities, like at this point, binaural rendering is not in Resolve, but that's just a current situation. And there's some other things like the MP4 export that you might want to avail yourself of. But if you have the production suite, you can certainly happily use it with working in Fairlight. Okay.
Cool. So I'm back. So awesome. So let's, I'm going to switch back to my slide that says Q&A, just because we need something to look at, right? Share. Here we go. Let's go back to there. All right. So let's actually do a little bit of Q&A. I imagine you guys have probably a million questions, so we'll just kind of see what we, if there's something that, that I didn't cover. I was trying to cover a lot in a short amount of time, but one thing I will point out, that the Fairlight book, the new version of Fairlight book with a full chapter at the end on Dolby Atmos is going to be on our website for a free download of the PDF as well as the media. And that should be available, if not the end of this week, by next week at the latest. It's just ready to go up. So once that's there, you can download the PDF, and you'll actually have access to the Nature's Fury project that I have. That's also a Dolby Atmos demo file, so that it's good to practice with it or work with a file so you have some idea. But a lot of what I was showing you is stepped through in that chapter, so give you an opportunity to try it out for yourself if you haven't before. So let's see. Let's look at see if there's a couple questions here.
Yeah, there's some questions.
Yes.
I'm gonna also start the poll just to get people's feedback.
Thank you.
And I'll launch that poll.
Hold on one second.
All right, polls launched. So everyone here, if you see the poll, please go ahead and answer these 4 questions. They'll be really helpful for us. And we'll leave it up for a few minutes, and then we'll share the results.
Yay.
And I have some questions. I'll just kind of read off for both of y'all. Is there a way to batch export different stems and down mixes, as in the digital Dolby Audio Master DAPs with offline re-renders?
Yes, you mean like I can downmix, you mean export out like a 5.1, a stereo, and a master file at the same time? Because yes, that's not hard to do. That's just setting it. You just have to set it up in the timeline. It's going to be based on your timeline tracks and what you have in those tracks. So if the example that I had earlier with the master file in the timeline, if I have different versions of that set up, whether I've bounced it ahead of time or if I have it set to just a channel format, I can choose how many of those show. And then when I do my export, I can export, if it's a channel-based track and I'm exporting it, then it's going to give me a channel-based deliverable. And so you can do those as separate renders, or you can also do them all at one time. It's just going to run them all at the same time. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. How does reverb work in Atmos?
You want to take that one, Adam?
Sure. I mean, reverb can be fed from bed or objects, and a reverb, the width of a reverb is kind of up to the user. So, I mean, if you have an object feeding a 712 reverb, for example, you would want that reverb return to come back to a 712 bed. If you wanted to have a mono reverb on a mono object track so that there's reverberation on a specific object that follows that object, that can be done as well. So, I mean, it's really entirely up to the user and what they're trying to achieve. If they're trying to create a diffuse reverb field fed from either beds or objects, or they actually want that reverb to follow the object. So hopefully that answers that.
Great, thanks. So there's, I think, a question about doing Dolby Atmos to binaural in DaVinci Resolve, but I think we kind of covered that because currently not something possibly.
Right. Currently, you can't monitor it in binaural, but if you import a master file, all of that binaural information is retained, and it's all there. You can even see it in the index, so it shows that it's all retained. So if you're just packaging and passing through, then it's still there, but you need to go to the production suite renderer or elsewhere to be able to monitor it at this time. But
okay. So there's a question regarding M1 Mac compatibility with Dolby Atmos. This person says they cannot run Dolby Atmos natively on an Apple M1 Mac. And will that be coming in the future?
That's an awesome question. I honestly do not know. But I would say, I mean, that's what Blackmagic Design is always chasing and has been supporting the M1s. So I would say check the forum on that one. If you're not familiar, if you go to the Blackmagic Design website, there is a forum for DaVinci Resolve, and a lot of those questions, those forums are monitored by our engineers. And so a lot of times if you throw a question like that out there, you'll get an answer or lots of answers because it's also monitored by users as well. So I don't have that answer for you, sorry.
Okay, one person had a question about, are there any tools managing phase and phase cancellation in Atmos?
Adam?
Meaning that if you are monitoring a stereo down mix or a 5.1 render of an Atmos presentation, no, there aren't any built-in tools, but certainly if you were taking, if you were rendering to stereo for your monitoring purposes, you could certainly take that output and put it into a phase meter to make sure that you have a degree of phase coherence. So should this ever go to mono, that you've got an acceptable an acceptable output. But there are no phase tools built into our applications. I don't know if there's a phase meter in. I mean, I imagine there
There is, yes.
There
One
very
of
well
our,
might be if you're doing a, but I imagine that's only applicable to a stereo bus.
right, and we do have a phase meter. I would just have to pull up a applicable track, like you said. But right here, we do have a phase meter that would give you that reading. So I mean, that's just one of the built-ins. Obviously, you may have your favorite, but yes, we have one built in. So.
Thank you. So one person wants to check Atmos mixes in their own in the smaller room. Is what's a recommended 714 monitoring system for a small resolve setup? So that might be the forum.
Some people use I mean, just so you know, there's people that, not that I'm saying there's one way better than the other, but depending on what kind of room you have, I mean, there's even people that will use a sound bar just to check something. You know, there's all kinds of kits and different ways you can go, but I think there are quite a few options out there. That's one of those, you know, what flavor of ice cream do you like? You know, you sort of, I would say check the forum and you'll get some feedback on people who are doing the same kinds of work you're doing. So they may have recommendations based on what types of shows or what you're working on. Did you have anything else to add on that, Adam?
No, I mean, you know, I think there, you know, there's, you know, there are a lot of, there are some very common monitoring setups around some of the bigger manufacturers that you might expect, you know, JBL, Genelec, you know, et cetera, and post rooms who have, you know, speaker pairings that work very well in small rooms and have monitor control systems, B-chain, if you choose to do that outside of Fairlight. So, you know, again, yeah, I would echo your sentiment that that's kind of what flavor of ice cream do you like?
Thank you. Follow up to an earlier question, is there a workflow that you would recommend for checking mono and stereo compatibility?
Stereo compatibility is, I mean, you can choose to render to stereo in in Fairlight, in Resolve Fairlight, or using the Dolby Atmos tools. If you are subsequently feeding a monitor controller, you could sum those to mono at that point. But rendering to mono itself is not in the tools. You can render to stereo, but you would have to sum, you know, to verify how well that works. But you would have to sum that yourself externally.
Great. I think we are at time right now. So
all right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Sherwin. And obviously, thank you so much, Adam, for joining me, and everyone who's came in and joined us today for this. You know, there's a lot more information. It's always coming out. So, you know, hopefully you get in there and test it. Like I said, it works pretty well. And, you know, it seems like all roads are leading this direction. So if you haven't jumped on already, it's time, right? So anyway, thank you very much. Anything you want to add?
No, thanks very much for letting us participate. And, you know, this is a great tool to add to the palette of tools that can create content in Dolby Atmos, and it's all good to see. And thanks everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you guys very much. And you know, if you want to check out any of our other webinars, Sherwin posted those links, or you can check. Are those on the Q&A or the chat, Sherwin?
it's in the chat. Probably, you know, they have to scroll up, but I'll paste it again.
Okay, so if you want to check the links for one of the other webinars, feel free to stay on for a few minutes, and I won't shut us down quite yet. So anyways, thank you guys so much, and have an awesome rest of your day or night, wherever you happen to be. So thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.